It's time to talk Gonzaga basketball.
Get ready.
It's the Spokesman-Review Zags Insiders Podcast.
Here we go.
Here's Jim Meehan and Richard Fox.
Good Monday morning. Welcome back to the Zags Basketball Insiders Podcast. Jim Meehan, Spokesman-Review, cover Gonzaga. Richard Fox, TV analyst on KHQ SWX for Gonzaga basketball games. Foxy, all good things must come to an end. And the Zags season's over. This is our last podcast of the season. It's been a pretty good run for us, pretty good run for the Zags. But I got two words for you. Emergency podcast.
Yeah, we might have to do that, right? I thought the same thing this weekend.
We're not letting this die so quickly.
I like that.
Let's go onward here. We've got the Zags. Season comes to an end in Wichita, Kansas, my birthplace. 1-1. They beat Georgia. Very impressive. Lost to Houston by 5. Got behind a ton early. I think they're down 14 at one point. And then came back that last 3 or 4 minutes. We're going to talk about that comeback. I will freely admit there was a point there where I was rewriting so fast, scrapping graph after graph on my screen. And I thought it was going to happen the way that was unfolding. And Houston was pretty rattled, but Cougars got it back together, hit some free throws, and end Gonzaga's season. The Zags do keep a bunch of streaks to going. 26 straight NCAA tournaments, 27 if you count 2020, which was canceled by the pandemic. They'd already qualified, would have been a 1 seed. They win an opening round game for 16 years in a row now with that win over Georgia. That's almost as mind-boggling as the overall NCAA tournament streak. And then the one that comes to an end is they're come up 1 win short of a 10th straight Sweet 16. But 2 really interesting games. Foxy, they did get back into the rankings. I think they were 24 in the AP poll last week. Came out right after the show, our show. And then if I'm remembering this right, I don't think there's another poll until after the season.
Mm-hmm.
AP didn't used to do that. Their final poll used to be after the conference tournament. So I think if there is another poll, which I'm guessing they'll stay with that from last year, I think they'll either stay there or move up a spot or 2. I think they'll be in the top 25. Not really neither here nor there, but maybe just a point of pride for their program to be in the top 25. And on the topic of good things coming to an end, Foxy, welcome to the most boring NCAA tournament ever.
So true.
We've got pretty much chalk across the board. I've told you this. I think you probably think the same thing. The first round games, and then the second round games. That stretch of 4 days is the best weekend, what do you want to call it, in sports. To me, that and the Masters, and for a lot of people. And you get the buzzer beaters, you get the final, the upsets, you get Cinderella, you get George Mason, you know what I mean? You get these great St. Peter's. You get these great stories, the top seeds going down, and we got almost none of that.
Mm-hmm.
For heaven's sakes, Foxy, Gonzaga's not in the Sweet 16. Something's off here. Can you live with this version of the tournament?
Well, a season doesn't make a trend, but certainly I think I'm reading and listening and certainly have my own thoughts and consternations about is this where this is going with just the NIL era? And, it's just interesting to you watch high major college basketball now and how much the high school level is being discounted or minimized as far as the value. I'd much rather get a mid-major guy who's done it for 2 or 3 years or even 4 and insert him into a role on my team because I know what I'm getting, right? Versus unless you're really getting the best of the best out of high school, freshman impacts are pretty light,
Yeah.
generally speaking. And nowadays, if you have a good freshman and you're, at Kansas or somewhere else, I mean, they might, it's just as likely they're going to go play somewhere else. It's so because of that, I do think you've seen a little bit of the talent drain at that mid level. But I'm not prepared to say it's a trend just because I do think this, it goes the other way. You see guys who are at high majors that can't carve out a role or have a difficult start to their career that go down a level or down to a lower conference level and have a real impact. And those programs can put something together, but it is it is less interesting, which is too bad. And you know, I, I'm not a barometer for everybody, but certainly I love watching the tournament just as much as anybody else. Normally, I'd be looking at what the games are at this point. I'll catch a game if I catch a game next weekend. I watched plenty of the SEC and the Big Ten and Big 12 during the regular season. It's just not as compelling, but it is what it is. Let's see where we're at in a year or two. If this trend kind of continues, then I think there might be a problem in college basketball.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Fuse called the tournament the greatest sporting event in the world. There's probably some World Cup soccer folks.
Yeah. I was going to say that.
Super Bowl, whatever. But man, to me, that was like a mid-January conference weekend, ho-hum, nondescript. Everybody's still watching the football playoffs. It is like, good grief. Don't ruin this tournament. That is the rally cry here. It's all power conference teams. One conference has 7 teams.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what folks want to see. I think that's what the power conferences might want to see, but hopefully some order is restored in the long run. Let's hope. Well, let's move on, Foxy. Sorry, I had to get that off.
No. Well said.
My travel-weary body needed to get that off my chest. The week that was, Georgia. First game, we both thought it would be a very difficult draw. I think we both thought Gonzaga was in pretty good shape. It's not the worst draw of all time, but 8-9, those are flip games. You saw it all weekend. But you couldn't ask for a better start than what Gonzaga did there. They came out, they looked like the team that's been in the tournament every year, made deep runs. They're experienced. They know the setting. They know how to handle the build-up, the warm-up. The pressers, all the stuff that goes with it. Georgia, to me, it looked like they had a little stage fright. I think they had one player that might have transferred in that had played in the tournament, but I think it was 27-3.
It was.
I was asking around if that's some kind of record start for an NCAA tournament. I didn't. The feedback I got was that it wasn't, but I'd like to see the scoreboard that was worse than that. 27-3 is hard to do against a very good team, and pretty much decided the issue. What did you see in those first 8, 9, 10 minutes that got Gonzaga going so quick?
Watching Gonzaga, they looked like a top 3 seed.
Yeah.
That's what they looked like, and I think that's really how they played over the weekend. And I couldn't help but think to myself what could have been a little bit for this run had they unlocked whatever they unlocked here at the last week and a half, 2 weeks of the season. And you just saw them overwhelm a Georgia team. I think that's a good point by you. I mean, younger, not having been in the tournament for a decade. There's a lot of scar tissue and muscle memory that you get when you have a team like Gonzaga with a ton of experience. I mean, certainly Battle and Ajayi, their first taste of it. But when you look up and down the roster, I mean, you've got the Nemhards, Hickmans, EKs, Greg, Huff now, his second go around. You've been in that environment. You're comfortable. And they just kind of put their foot on their throat and never really let up. I know the second half, I want to say, was a tie ball game, but at that point the game was decided. Um, I just really impressed, Jim. It felt I was curious. I think you were too after the St. Mary's win, and putting Huff in the lineup, and how physical Gonzaga was in that game, and how different they looked. Would that carry over? And it certainly did. Not only against Georgia, but certainly against Houston, which we'll talk about here momentarily. But I don't know how. There's not much to say other than they just put a real whooping on Georgia,
Yeah.
and could kind of coast there in the second half a little bit. I mean, I don't think he broke 20 minutes. It was a good opportunity, I think, for them to go deeper on their bench, which they did, and keep guys fresh for Saturday.
I thought the best thing that came out of that too is, for the most part, it's been Ryan Nembhard, Graham Ike, Ryan with a dozen assists and Graham with 18, 20, 22 points every night out practically. Nolan went off. I mean, I think he had three, what was he, 5 of 6 or
5
something?
of 6, 18 points, yep.
I mean, he was as good as he's been. And he had a terrific run last year. I went back and looked up the numbers, shooting over 50%, I think, from three. All 3 games in double digits last year, that game as well. Great sign. Braden Huff, all Braden's done in his second and third career starts is score 18 in each game.
Yeah.
And shot, I don't know, probably 65, 70%. And he's battling his tail off on defense. It's those are bad, not bad assignments, I mean, tough assignments. The Newell kid he is nice player. He's going to be a first-round guy. He's long, he's young, but he's going to fill out, and he's got scoring ability, athletic ability, all the things they look for. And, though it seemed like everybody had a good night, especially the guys that maybe aren't, counted on quite as much. And that to me felt like a big deal going into the next game. Kind of even made it feel like a better matchup. But I thought one of the keys too is they wrapped up I think it's Demare or Demare. I heard it both ways over the weekend, but he really struggled. Newell did his thing, but there was no secondary help. And the way they were shooting early, the 3 balls were not close. We're not like in and out and they'll finally fall. No, it was not happening. And so I just thought defensively very solid. It got within 15, 16, 17 or something, but you never got the sense that thing was flipping. What'd you make of the defensive side of the ball and kind of how the non-Nembhard Ike guys really were kind of carried them in a lot of ways?
Well, look, I think defensively, the last 3 games of the year, Gonzaga, their presence physically was felt by the other team. And you saw that, on the perimeter. I mean, there's some of the same mistakes that you and I have identified all year. Those are going to happen, right? You're never pitching a perfect game. You're going to overhelp. You're going to forget a rotation. That happens. But you can absorb those and weather those a whole lot more effectively, consistently, if the effort is there and you're physical. And I think you saw that against Georgia. I also think maybe for Georgia, I mean, it's a big environment. First time on that stage. I think you saw some jitters and a very comfortable team again in Gonzaga that was able to take advantage of that. I mean, they looked like been here, done that. Let's go. We'll talk about Nolan, I'm sure, here as we get into the Houston game, but maybe this is the time to just try to give him some flowers. I mean, just a really good year for him. We talked about it last week going into the tournament. At the WCC tournament, his numbers really didn't jump out at you, only scoring 6 a game, didn't shoot it well, but his defense, his connectivity on that end was really important. We felt like, but the previous 5 games, he would average in 17 a game, shooting almost 50% from 3, and that was who we saw against Georgia. One of the best spot-up shooters Mark's ever had. His percentage isn't nearly as good when he's trying to shoot that shot off the dribble, but boy, as a catch and shoot guy, he is really consistent, and he got those looks against Georgia. solid with the ball, 3 assists, just the one turnover. Um, and the others were fine. Were solid, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. I was trying to think about against Houston, the bench 11 points, Georgia 13. I just figured, what is the bench production for Gonzaga? What has it been in the postseason? That's 4 games.
Yeah.
Just under 11 points per game, 34% from the field, 2 of 15 the last 4 games off your bench.
Is that
We
what?
talked,
Yeah,
yeah,
look
we
at
talked.
you.
I can now. If you ask me to multiply it all, I'm going to get in trouble here. But um, that was there's so we talked so much about the depth all year, and you saw it in different ways. But that depth, and when you put Huff in the starting lineup, you lost so much of that scoring punch off of the bench, right? That's kind of, you were sacrificing a little bit of that, a lot of that, and now you put him in the starting lineup. I just think you saw that in the postseason. There just wasn't a lot of pop off your bench. Um, and I think that hurt them a bit against Houston. Certainly not having, Ben was good, but and we'll get into that, but didn't play a whole ton. So, look, good game. It certainly felt like it went from, boy, Gonzaga might have a puncher's chance against Houston to,
Oh yeah.
hey, now if they certainly have to play their best game probably of the year, but they're pretty close to doing that already. So I went into the game Saturday with a lot of optimism that they were going to certainly make that a game, and they did.
Same. You summed my feelings up exactly. Good research, Foxy. I think I know some beat writer that should have done that. I should mention, I don't know how I didn't, Caleb Battle, very good in that game. 8 boards. I think he had 24 points, 4 threes, top of my head.
Yep, 4, 7, 8 rebounds.
Terrific game out of him, and kind of continuing his trend over this last month. But let's get on to Houston, the game that ended Gonzaga's season. And all those great things Gonzaga did early against Georgia, it was Houston doing those things. They threw the first punch. They can throw a punch now. When they screen you, you are screened. When they go to the boards, you had better dig a trench and hold your ground, because they are, and they're flying in there and long and athletic, and they just got off to a almost a perfect start. And I'm sure Kelvin told them, hey, this team, a lot of confidence, a lot of, they played great in the first round, but so did we. I mean, if you watch that SIEU game or SIUE game they played, they gave up 40 points. They could have named the score. And I know that's 116, but you could see the physicality, effort, that they are one of the most relentless teams I've ever seen, which Kelvin Sampson would take as the ultimate compliment. That's how he coaches. That's how they play. And they kind of knocked Gonzaga around. They blocked a couple shots early in the paint. I really thought that was a troubling sign. They got on the glass. When they got on the glass, they kept getting threes after they got. That happened 3 or 4 times. I know Gonzaga knew that was coming. They were not going to come out like wallflowers. But boy, to get down that quick made it a really uphill battle. What'd you see at the start?
I was having flashbacks of the Baylor national championship. I mean, if you remember that first possession against Baylor, it was like 3 offensive rebounds.
Yeah.
They looked like grown men, and they were manhandling Timmy inside. And when Watson came in the game, that was a Gonzaga team that didn't have a lot of kind of girth and strength around the basket. Obviously an exceptional team, but I credit this group. I mean, it felt there early like they were going to lose hold of the rope.
Going to be a 20-pointer.
And they just stuck with it. I think it says a lot about having experience both on your roster, but also Mark's been doing this for a long time. There's no panic. You understand it's a long game. It's fun, interesting on TV. They interviewed Samson, and they had a good start, and he said something to the effect of, "Yeah, we got to keep playing. Who knows where this game's going to be in an hour?"
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, I never thought of it that way. Like we're 15 minutes into this thing. There's another hour and 45 minutes left of this broadcast. Like there's a lot that could happen. So I was just really impressed with the toughness Gonzaga showed. Um, you know, Good teams get blown out there. Great teams find a way to kind of stay tethered to the to a team like Houston. Try to give yourself a chance. But you're right. I thought the rebounding. It wasn't just that it hurt Gonzaga. It was painful. You would get a stop, and then it would be this, a kind of a cheap offensive rebound, quick put back, or kick it out to a 3-point shooter. Houston with 13 offensive rebounds, 20 points off of those. Gonzaga was pretty good with the ball, 11 turnovers. But Houston, 15 points off those turnovers. But more importantly, it felt like the turnovers in the second half, by my count, there were three. On the last 7 minutes, there were three.
Yeah.
They all hurt. Battle had one, and Nembhard had a couple. And they just were, the timing of them, it felt like Gonzaga was about to, get under that, 7, 8, 9 mark, and then the turnover would happen. Houston would take advantage. So, that's what teams like Houston that have a legitimate chance to win a national championship are going to do, is they're going to, every mistake you make will be painful.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was a really interesting game. I think from a scheme perspective, I think in a lot of ways, watching it, it felt like both teams had a very similar defensive game plan with some variance. Houston, on those ball screens are going to try to blow it up. They did that early. It didn't necessarily cost Gonzaga in the way of turnovers, but it just gets you out of what you want to do. But I thought you saw Gonzaga settle in and start adjusting to that. It's, if you think about a rope that has knots in it, and if you were to lay that rope around the 3-point line, if I catch it on the wing, my first pass is usually the next rope up, right? Gonzaga started skipping the ball, and now that would open up the weak side of the floor. Then in the second half, a lot of those pick and rolls were on the wing, where it's harder for Houston to really blow that up. And now you've got Ike in particular with an isolation. It was interesting to see both he and Huff start backing guys down from the 3-point line. But that was a good adjustment, in that now you've cleared out a side for Ike.
No immediate double. Yeah.
And on the flip side, I thought Gonzaga really, it seemed to me like they thought to themselves, Roberts and Tugler, their bigs, Francis, are going to have to beat us. And when Gonzaga would blow up the ball screen, and the bigs would do what's called Xing that ball screen. So in this example, Huff blows up the ball screen, stays out, and Ike's playing center field, right? Huff's job is to get back to the guy on the low block, and then Ike is going to meet, say, Roberts, right? And it looked to me like they thought, let's see if these guys can beat us. And Roberts, to me, was the difference.
Yeah, he made it.
Going into the game, he was averaging under 11 points a game, taking less than 9 shots, and he shot about 50%. He took 18 shots. Yeah. And the one thing I kept thinking to myself watching it was, Gonzaga's bigs would meet them in the middle of the key. And as the game went on, I thought to myself, boy, if they could just get out and meet him at the free throw line,
make him more.
That's more uncomfortable for Roberts to have to make a play, because Gonzaga was really tethered to their shooters. You could tell they did not want to give up catch and shoot threes. But credit Roberts, and he and Tugler, they hit a couple like what looked like horse shots with their left hand, kind of little runners from 15, 14 feet. I don't think they're not making those on a consistent basis. And then when they would miss it, not only can those guys rebound the ball, but Houston's guards attacked the glass. Wilson, I think it was, in the second half, had a couple critical. Was it Wilson? Yeah, a couple critical offensive rebounds where Battle didn't box out. Um, so it just was a really interesting game, I thought, just from a game plan perspective. I think Gonzaga's adjustments in game and after halftime were exceptional, gave him a chance. But that's a really good Houston team. You need guys to play outside themselves. Obviously, Roberts did that, Tugler to some degree, and then Cryer was just, amazing. I mean, he certainly got some open looks, but he hit some really, really tough shots over Nemhard in particular. And obviously, Ryan's not the biggest guy, so and neither's Cryer, but it's there's a difference between having 6'5", 6'6", trying to get a hand up, and 6 foot. And I thought Cryer was comfortable even on some of those tough shots. So. I mean, there's a lot of takeaways in the game, but those obviously are my initial ones.
That is a great comparison to Baylor in the national title game. That is exactly what that felt like watching both live. Now, Roberts, because coming off an ankle injury too, he didn't start the first game of the tournament. They kind of worked him in for, I don't know, 15, 18 minutes or whatever, and he was terrific. And a difference maker. Cryer hitting all the threes. They did kind of bottle him up for the first 9-10 minutes of the second half, and then
yeah. He went off for like 9 points, like boom, boom, boom.
He's a great player. I mean, he is a handful on the bounce, on the spot up. But you're right. The Zags. I was very impressed with the way Huff and EK. I mean, early on, I think Huff missed a shot or two, turned it over, looked like, little man, this is a big stage here. And EK didn't have a great first half either. But, man, those guys both turned it around, and EK carried Gonzaga in the second half. He was dominant in the post. He kept giving them chance after chance. They'd get within 9, and they'd give up 3 in a row. They'd get within 8, and I think they got to 7 a couple times, and he was the one who kept them right there. And Nemhard did his thing. He had a bunch of assists. Neither one of them could stop each other. It was the last thing I could have expected of the game. Zag scored 49 points on a team that gives up 57.9.
I know.
Number one in the country. Houston scores 46, and they slowed down a ton in the last 5 minutes, or they'd have hit 50. I would have never thought that was going to happen. But Zags threw that press out for the last 3.5 minutes. Michael Ajayi, Emmanuel, Innocenti, Battle, Nemhard, and I think EK was the 5. And I thought Ajayi almost flipped that game on it. He was so active and bothering people. And Houston turned it over a couple times. They weren't getting good looks. They were running the clock, trying to get, 30 seconds instead of 2 points. There was a real moment there where I thought Houston's not handling this thing. Gonzaga is got all the momentum. The crowd's going berserk in there. I thought it was going to happen. I really did. Well, first, the effectiveness of the press, and then the last play. They were trying for something else. It got bottled up. Credit to Houston. I think they maybe knew something was coming there because they'd run that. I think Mark said they'd had great success with that play with Ryan before.
They ran it, if you remember, against UCLA.
Yeah.
And then I forget the other game. They tried it this year, but no timeouts. You understand that's a play that you've got designed for that situation.
Yeah, I think and the tough part is Battle played very well. He didn't shoot it great, but he was very he was an impactful player, and he got kind of stuck with the ball over there with 2 huge guys straight.
Yeah,
he had no chance, and he couldn't pass it. I think the shot clock was pretty low as well, if I remember right. So that went. I think that went wrong, and Houston had the right read on it. They were prepared. So, last play in the press. What do you make?
Yeah. That last play, when we've seen it previously, it's almost a handoff to Nemhard to get to the basket, and that getting it to Battle coming off as a secondary look, and it felt like they were sped up a little bit. When Ike got it, Nemhard really didn't run off of him so much as just kind of ran by him, and then the handoff was too loose. There wasn't enough. There was too much space between Battle and Ike, which I think allowed the Houston defender, it might have been Wilson, I can't remember, to kind of blow it up a little bit, and it wasn't a clean delivery. Um, and then Caleb's now bobbling the ball. You're trying to be mindful. You know how much time you have internally, but at the same time, this is a high pressure situation. You might be speeding up in your mind a little bit.
Yeah.
There wasn't probably enough time for him to try to kick it back out to Ike or somebody else, but we have the benefit of looking at it from a 30,000-foot view on TV where you can see the entirety of the floor, and I don't have two or three guys in my space. So, certainly, obviously Gonzaga would have loved to be able to get a shot off there. I thought the press, they tried doing the press in the first half a bit, but it wasn't as effective. And I don't believe Michael was in the game when they did it. His length in the first half, I don't know if Michael was in it, but certainly in the second half. And not only that, but the adjustment was the wings. You saw Mark want them to come up the floor. So instead of hanging back, say, closer to the 3-point line extended, we're just inside half court. So as the ball handler crosses half court, now we've got, Michael coming over, on ball defender. We've got the half court line, the sideline. It was just more effective. And certainly, Houston did not handle it well. And I mean, I'm watching this thing with 2:33. Gonzaga calls timeout. They're down 11.
Yeah.
Ike has 7 points down the stretch. They're right there. And I'm thinking to myself, at 2:33, this game's over.
You should be thinking, damn, Meehan's got to do a lot of rewriting. That's what you should.
Well, next time I will. I'll text you next time. Be like, oh boy. But I just, that's the thing, man. These tournament games aren't over till they're over, and I feel a lot. Personally, I feel great pride in the fight that they showed. We certainly tried. We do this podcast, and I certainly tried to be as objective as possible and as fair and reasonable, and kind of look at it from as not a detached perspective, but certainly not as like some homer. But you get in the tournament, you see that kind of resiliency and that effort, and I couldn't help but feel it said a lot about that group. It said a lot about the program and the fact that they were there, and just another late game situation where you just couldn't quite connect all the dots. In a lot of ways, it felt like that last play was just a fitting way to end the year, where they were close so much throughout the year, and then there's this play where it doesn't, like we said all year, there's not like this one overarching theme or this trend or this player or something we could put our thumb on and say this is the problem. It just felt in a lot of ways that just for whatever reason, putting all the dots together was just difficult for this group, and that play was a perfect example of that, in my opinion.
A very good, another great point. Put it this way: if they'd have lost by 14, never made a real run, I think the tenor on that game and on the season would have been a little bit different. But I mean, they were flying around that court. They looked like Houston looked at the start. I mean, Houston smothered those screens. Their recovery is lightning and long, and so it's even better when they've got the long arm. I mean, it was impressive to watch, but the Zags pretty much solved that. And I just think if it had ended up, 86-70,
yeah,
it would have had a whole different feel to it. But I think two or three of those guys, I know Ike, Benny, maybe one other, I can't remember, Caleb. If we had 30 more seconds.
Oh, I know. I felt like another minute. And right. I agree.
All right. That's enough of Houston. Let's get to the most interesting season, the off season. around here is always who's coming, who's going in the
Right.
draft, who's staying, who's transferring, who's arriving. All those questions will play out. I think the portal opened for good, opened doors today, so you'll see a billion names on there. Let's start with who's coming back. And we've talked a little bit about this. Graham Ike does have a year. He did not do the senior ceremony before the last home game. I think that cracks the door open a little more for him coming back. Asked him about it after the game. Knew he was not going to really address it because he's just played a intense game in his last game of his technically senior year. And that's kind of what he said. I'm not thinking about it. That's for another day, all those things. My sense, nothing more than that, is I think that door is open a bit more. I think there's a reasonable chance he'll come back. If I'm him, I'm trying the draft. I want to see where I stand. I'm working out. I want to get the feedback. If I got a shot, I'm going, if I'm going to be picked or not. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened, but I do think there's a reasonable chance he'll be back. I think with NIL and what he looks around and sees in the locker room and who's coming, we got another shot to make a run at this. We'll see. I wouldn't have thought that probably 2 months ago. Michael Ajayi has an extra year because of the JC situation. When I asked him about that, 2.5 months ago, he didn't shut the door, but he was pretty much sounding like he was done at the end of the year. Asked him about it again after the game, and you'll be reading all this in a day or so. He was more amenable to it. Again, the door is open a little more for Michael. Now, he's got decisions too. He went through the draft process, so you could see him doing it again. He opened some eyes during the draft process. He was getting some good reviews. He could come back. He could transfer. Who knows? We'll see where that goes. But I think that opened up a little more too. Maybe not as wide as for Ike, but similar. Those two, obviously, their decisions will shape things. I'm presuming Huff is coming back, but man, he had a great couple weeks to end the season and kind of showed that the future is enormously bright for that kid. And then you've got Dusty Stromer, kind of an up and down year. We'll see what Dusty. I talked to him, and he sounds like he's ready to go to work. He's got a great attitude. So the guys who were in and out of the lineup, lost starting jobs, all those things. You talk to them, and they handle it beyond belief. What they have: Benny Gregg, Huff, Dusty, all of them. It's like, man, it has to be hard personally, but they kind of always talk about the team before the we before me, or whatever the saying is. They have that perspective. Real quick, Fogel, incoming 6'6", kind of rangy guard, top 35 in the ESPN. Worley, the kid from Virginia. He was like a top 25 recruit in the 2021 class. He's coming in, another 6'7", rangy kind of guy. So those 2, 3, 4, probably 2, 3 more than 4 type players. You got Braden Smith, sat out this year, played at Colgate 2 years, Patriot League Player of the Year last year, 12.5 points, 5.6 assists. He's started 70 games in his college career. He's played in 2 NCAAs. He lined up against Baylor and Texas in the first rounds.
Right.
Kind of the presumed guy at point guard. You've got Emmanuel Innocenti getting, he has to be a bigger role, you would think. Ismaila, the 7-footer, showed some things in he was a big reason the whole season turned because of what he did at Santa Clara. If they'd have lost that game, it would have been a little dreary. You got to see him making a little more of a jump. We obviously know Huff's going to be big time. He's on his way. What do you think happens with Mike, with Graham, and kind of that picture of outlook of the team picture there with if most of those guys do their usual 2 or 3 big transfer additions.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't have a great feel for Gonzaga's NIL budget in comparison to the Dukes and Kansases of the world, but I do get the impression that they've got a pretty healthy one, and I think they can be competitive. So I don't know if it's an NIL conversation so much as it's a conversation with some of these guys about role and about where they fit. Um, they lose so much. I presume Ajayi is not coming back for no reason other than just what he's kind of said in the past and how he tested the waters last year. Some guys just want to go, they want to be professional. I think the outlook for Gonzaga, not knowing who they may get in the portal, because they would certainly be active in the portal, changes dramatically if Graham and Braden both come back.
Yeah.
I think that they unlock something with those two together. I think those two show that they can play together and be very effective. It was probably the simplest solution in front of them the whole time, and I never would have thought to do it. But once you saw it made all the sense in the world. And I just think it would be exciting to see that tandem for an entire year play together, and I think it would make Gonzaga very difficult out for anybody on any given night, just with the size and the scoring that those two provide up front. And then I think with Diani coming in off the bench, who presents a little bit more of a traditional shot blocker, rim runner. He's got good hands. That's a good spot for him to be in as well from a developmental perspective. He's going to play, but not be asked to play too much. So I think if those three are in the mix, I think your front court is set. You might want to find an athlete up front, maybe a kind of a hybrid forward type. I think sometimes you watch Alabama play, you watch these SEC schools play, and they just seem to have at least one of those guys who they're just crazy explosive, make plays, don't need the ball. It seems like there's a lot of those guys out there, at least in the SEC. Can you get one for yourself? But I think you're set up front. I just think there's so many questions, Jim, for this group on the perimeter. You lose Caleb, who I think on balance was a great addition. I know that there were some real ups and downs, but I think on balance, he did what they wanted him to do, and he didn't shoot it well against Houston, but he's also asked to take a lot of tough shots against the Cougars. That was kind of his role, right? So you expect his percentage to be down a little bit, but you saw him. He was very good on the ball defensively. I thought in rotations. And Emmanuel's got a little bit of that, but he doesn't score at that level, at least not yet. So I think another wing would be a nice thing to get, and just some size on the perimeter. Smith has certainly got a good resume, but quite frankly, a lot like Ryan when he came, his 3-point percentage wasn't very good at Creighton for Ryan, and I think for Smith at Colgate it doesn't jump out at you. Has that improved? But I think it's nice to have a little bit more size on the ball at times. So I'd expect that we're going to try to go get another ball handler that has some size. And they're really long on that wing as far as shooting guards go. You've got Emmanuel, who I think has firmly cemented himself as a guy that's part of the future plan. I think his shooting is certainly going to be there. Can he be a little bit more creative with the ball? I don't know. But he doesn't turn it over, makes solid plays. The Worley kid, from what I understand, is a just high level defender.
Yep.
Jump shot is a work in progress. But sometimes in some of these games, you can't make buckets anyway. You got to get stops. He's got good size. And then the Fogle kid, I don't know how much of an impact he's going to have, Jim, but certainly it appears to be a nice piece for a year or two from now, at worst. And then for Dusty, I'll be very interested to see if he comes back. And I think sometimes, I transferred, so I am certainly not completely objective to this, but sometimes, and you hear coaches, and it drives me up a wall talking about, as if these kids all have a problem, and that they're looking at this the wrong way. There's certainly some merit to the idea that stay somewhere, build some equity, develop, and get an opportunity on the back half of your career. But for a lot of these guys, it's about, I've got 4 years to play basketball.
Yeah.
I want to play. And sometimes you're at a place long enough, and maybe you come to the conclusion that just I'm not a good fit for what they want to do. So there's certainly a lot of movement in the transfer portal, and people may latch on to the story that supports the idea that it's about the money and it's kids with bad attitudes. But I like the freedom that these guys have, and I know it creates a lot more work for these coaches, but thankfully they're all paid really well. And that's kind of what the money's for. So that's a long way of me saying I don't know for Dusty what that means for him. I agree with you. I like him. I think he's got a good approach.
I think he's got a good future.
I think he's a good player.
He is.
And when you're on a team that has this much veteran leadership, or rather, guys who played as long as they played, it can be hard to be. You don't get the same opportunity to play through the same amount of mistakes as you might need to play through to develop. And then his shot completely abandoned him. And that's a confidence thing, because we've seen him make those shots. He's got a good jump shot, but I think as we got into conference schedules, his confidence just disappeared. Does a confident Dusty Stromer have a role on this team? I don't know. And the last guy, you didn't bring him up, and I don't know what's going to happen with Steel Ventures, but he's been out last couple.
Me back there, he's coming back, and he's on his way.
And I don't know what he's going to look like physically, but I do know that when he was at Eastern, he was a really impactful guy. And I think he's got a couple of years left, maybe one, but he can shoot it, and he's 6'7". So
that's a lot of weight.
That's a lot.
6'6", 6'7".
Yeah, it's a lot of wings, but what they don't have is they got one ball handler.
Yeah.
It's Smith. Everybody else on that wing is catch and shoot, cut, and hopefully a defender. They need more guys who can handle the ball, in my opinion. So I agree with you. Emergency podcast in a couple of weeks might be in order, but I think they're going to be really active, man. I really think they're going to try to go get another high-level guard, if not two guys on the perimeter. And like I said, if Ike, Huff, and Diani are in the mix next year, and they maybe can get one more athlete, I think they're going to be a handful. I really do.
Yeah, I think the portal job one is, if it's not necessarily a point guard, it's a combo guard who can handle the ball and be your secondary guy. If Braden's in foul trouble or whatever, you got to have that. It's like Nolan and Ryan. You have to have, and Caliph could have been helped out with that. So somebody like that, preferably taller, have some defensive 6'3", 6'4" type. I think that's what you're going to see. You're going to see that's priority one, getting at least one more ball handler. Another was, as you mentioned, is kind of that legit 4 athletic. I don't know. It's not how 3-4, 6'7", 6'8". Can do some things on his own. That's probably in there too. Maybe even a 6'5" guard. If a combo can handle it a little. Those don't grow on trees either. But those are the spots. If those guys return in the bigs return, got a ton of wings potentially. So it doesn't leave a ton of spots open, but they're going to hit the portal, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's two guards and one kind of 3-4 type of person.
Well,
if Michael, I mean, who knows? They got so many questions that got to be answered before they know exactly who they go get. But ball handler, combo, whatever you want to call it, that's job one.
And they have to shoot the ball better. I don't know. A few weeks ago we looked at where this team ranked, and it was obviously the worst shooting team Mark Few's ever had. I don't know where they ended up for the year.
I believe. Yeah.
But they have to find some shooting.
Have it with Steele. It might.
They might. And Dusty's, he's at one point was shooting well north of 40%.
Yep. At one point, Braden Huff's got a beautiful stroke. He is not the numbers he had this year. He hit 2 threes in the tournament. I think with a shot and a half or 2 a game or 3, whatever out there, he's going to be a 35 to 38% guy who can stretch it because he's 6'10" and he can get a shot up. I think he can do that, and his stroke is good enough. I think he will help that picture a little too when him and they play together.
Right. But Braden shoots 65% around the basket. So, I mean, that's a nice wrinkle. And I think, when you play two bigs like those two, having, and Graham's got the ability to knock it down, but having both of them skilled enough to step out allows you to do more offensively. But ultimately, when you get to the tournament, guards are what win.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. Right. And so, the bigs are critical, but when you watch the NCAA tournament, this is in the NBA, guards that can handle the ball, create space, shoot are what you need. And I'll be fascinated to see what this roster looks like. I'll be, who is going to be out there in the portal. The majority of these teams that are in the tournament are done. So a lot of these kids, I mean, it's going to be a busy, busy week. And the other thing I would say too is just because you're on the team today doesn't mean the staff's going to encourage you to come back.
I agree.
It is a different era now.
Yeah.
If I'm paying you, if I paid you for this year, I'm under no obligation to pay you for next year. So I'll be just interested. We're not going to know the ins and outs more than likely, to that level of detail, but those are going to be some conversations that happen with guys on this roster to say, this is who we've prioritized from a monetary perspective. We have this much left to go get these player types. I'm not sure what we can pay you right now. We'll get back to you.
Yeah. No, you're down.
It's it's a totally different era, and it's the part of the people refer to as like the player empowerment era, which I'm all about. But this is the other side of it, where I'm not obligated to pay you, and I don't want to pay you next year. Or if I'm paying you $200,000, we got 25 for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both
so
ways.
It'll be interesting. I keep looking this. I wonder when the first ESPN article will come out ranking all these transfers, and it's a fascinating time, and you're gonna have a lot of guys who test the waters and wait to the last minute, which is always interesting. I hope if Graham tests the waters, he doesn't do that. I remember Timmy and Strother did that, and I never quite understood why. I think Ajayi did that last year. So the sooner you can get clarity on the guys on your current roster, the easier it is for you to build the rest of your roster out, right? But if Graham's going to test it and say, I'm not so sure yet, now, there's a point in time where as a staff, I can't wait for you, Graham. Like we have a responsibility here, so now we got to go get somebody else up front. So the sooner they have clarity on those questions, I think the better.
Man, I was looking at all the transfers listed today that came out.
Are they out already?
You could make a great team just on what you see online today. Well, we got to point to the finish line here. We do the season review every year. This is oftentimes embarrassing for how far off we are on our picks.
Oh my God!
But here we go. First show of the year, we picked up. Hold on, I got somebody trying to interrupt things. Foxy, you went with 3 regular season losses, 4 overall. You said they were going to make the Final Four with what they brought back, and if their defense came along. And then you added it may take some time. Spot on. I had 4 regular season losses, 1 in league. I had them winning the league. We both did. We both said that matter-of-factly, like it was a given. We were dead wrong. I got the record closer. Very shallow victory for me over you.
If we call it a victory.
Well, I am calling it a victory, and that's 2 years
Okay.
in a row I've got you on the record, overall record. So 2-0 on there. Shallow victories, I admit. We both had them going 1-1 in the tournament in last week's show, so we did hit that dead on what they would do in the tournament. So all in all, I think if they would have taken care of business during the season, won a couple of those toss-up games, they would have been in the 5-6 range, and we might have a little different discussion going today. But not bad, not bad. We'll try to do better. So that's going to do it. Hey, it's our final show. I want to say a big thank you to Christy Burns all season. Appreciate it. Saves us week after week. Foxy, always a treat to do this with you. It's one of the better 45, 50 minutes I spend of the
You too,
week.
buddy. You too, buddy.
If you listen to today's show, and you will realize Foxy is as good as at his analyst role on TV. On here, you can see why, some of the points he made just today. So always fun. Great big thanks to everybody out there who listens, who's responded to us, emails, texts, stopping me at games. Been very, very rewarding to hear from everybody. So we say thanks to all of you. Emergency pod, keep that in mind. That could happen depending on what happens. So for now, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.